Good evening, friends. Welcome back. It's so lovely to have you here with me tonight. I hope you found a comfortable spot. Maybe your favorite pillow is fluffed just right. Maybe you've dimmed the lights low, and perhaps you've pulled that soft blanket up around your shoulders. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. We're going on a journey tonight, but not one that requires any effort from you. Just close your eyes, or let them grow heavy as you listen, and let my voice carry you back way back to ancient Rome. Tonight, we're going to explore something fascinating, something that might make you smile or wrinkle your nose just a little, but all in the gentlest way. We're going to discover 5 things the Romans considered completely normal, everyday, ordinary, nothing to see here normal, that would make most of us today say, wait, they did what? But here's the beautiful thing. We're going to explore it all at the perfect pace for drifting off, with rich details and warm stories, like we're sitting by a crackling fire in a Roman villa, the cool night breeze drifting through the open courtyard, and time has simply stopped. Before we begin, if this calm journey helps you unwind tonight, if my voice becomes a gentle companion as you drift toward sleep, would you tap that like button for me? And if you'd like more of these peaceful, historical wanderings, subscribe bonely if it feels right. I'm here, either way. Oh, and I'm curious, where are you listening from? And what time is it in your country right now? Let me know in the comments below. I love imagining all of you scattered across the world, finding a moment of peace at the same time now. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of the day melting away. We're about to step through a doorway in time, into the bustling, strange, surprisingly relatable world of ancient Rome. And we begin with something that happened every single day in nearly every Roman household. Let me tell you about the morning routine in a Roman household. Sometime around 150 AD, picture this. You wake up as the first golden light slips through the narrow window of your insula. That's the apartment building where most Romans lived, stacked stories high, a bit like a crowded city block today. The air is cool just before dawn, and somewhere down the street, you hear the faint call of a vendor already setting up his cart. You stretch, yawn, and think about the day ahead. But first, nature calls. Now, imagine walking down the stone corridor, your sandals slapping softly against the worn floor, and you arrive at the public latrine. Yes, public. Not a private bathroom, not even a little closet tucked away. The latrine is a large room with stone benches lining the walls, and carved into those benches are circular holes, one right next to the other. No stalls, no doors, no privacy. You sit down beside your neighbor, maybe Marcus, the baker, or Julia, who sells flowers in the forum, and you chat. You discuss the weather, the latest chariot race, maybe some gossip about the emperor. This is perfectly normal. In fact, it's social. Beneath you, a channel of running water flows, carrying waste away, a clever bit of Roman engineering. And on the floor, in front of you, in a small trough of constantly flowing water, there sits a sponge, but not just any sponge. This sponge is attached to a stick, like some ancient precursor to a toilet brush, and it's shared by everyone who comes into this latrine day after day. The Romans called it a tersorium. Let that word roll gently through your mind. Tersorium. Soft, almost musical. But its function, well, Let's just say that after you finished your business, you'd reach down, grab that communal sponge on a stick, dip it in the flowing water, and use it to clean yourself. Then you'd swish it around in the trough again and leave it for the next person. No paper, no privacy, just a shared sponge sitting there in the water, waiting patiently for its next use. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be shifting a little under your blanket, maybe wincing just slightly. But here's the thing, and let your mind settle into this. They didn't think it was disgusting. To the Romans, this was hygienic. After all, the water was flowing, constantly moving, carrying things away. The sponge was rinsed. It made perfect sense to them. The same way we think nothing of touching a door handle in a public restroom today, or using a shared pen at the bank. It's all about context, about what feels normal. Imagine the sound in that latrine for a moment, the gentle trickle of water echoing softly off the stone walls. Low voices murmuring, someone laughing at a joke, the scrape of sandals. The air is cool and damp, and there's a faint mineral smell from the water. Outside, the city is beginning to wake, carts rumbling, hammers clanging from a nearby workshop, a rooster crowing in the distance. And you're just sitting there, part of the rhythm of daily life, completely at ease. Some latrines were fancier than others, of course. If you were wealthy, you might have a latrine in your own domicile private house, and it would be beautifully decorated. Marble benches, maybe a mosaic on the floor depicting dolphins or geometric patterns. Some even had little shrines to Fortuna, the goddess of luck, because, well, you never knew when you might need a bit of good fortune. The Romans had a sense of humor about these things. They understood that everyone, from the emperor to the slave, had to answer the same call of nature. But let's linger for a moment on that sponge. Archaeologists have found evidence of these tersorium sticks at Roman sites all across the empire, from the bustling streets of Rome itself to the far-flung outposts in Britain and North Africa. In Pompeii, frozen in time by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, they found latrines with the grooves still visible where the sponges would rest. And in some places, they found the sticks themselves, preserved in the dry desert air or the oxygen-free mud of a collapsed building. There's a certain beauty to it, if you think about it gently. The Romans built an entire infrastructure around communal life. They valued the baths, the forums, the theaters, places where people came together. The latrine was just another part of that tapestry, another thread in the social fabric. You weren't isolated behind a locked door, hurriedly finishing so someone else could have a turn. You were part of a community, even in the most private of moments. And the sponge itself, where did it come from? Natural sea sponges, harvested from the Mediterranean. Soft, absorbent, renewable. Divers would plunge into the clear blue water, holding their breath, and pull these sponges from the rocks below. They'd bring them up, dry them, trim them, and attach them to wooden sticks. It was a whole industry, a trade. Someone's livelihood depended on providing sponges for latrines across the empire. Now, you might wonder, did anyone ever get sick from this? Did they understand germs, bacteria, infection? The answer is, not in the way we do. The Romans didn't have microscopes. They didn't know about pathogens. But they were surprisingly sophisticated about public health in other ways. They built aqueducts to bring fresh water into the city's engineering marvels that still stand today. some of them arching gracefully across valleys. They built sewers, like the famous Cloaca Maxima in Rome, which still functions after more than 2,000 years. They valued cleanliness in their own way. They bathed regularly, often daily, in the great public baths, scraping their skin with curved metal tools called strigils and anointing themselves with olive oil. But the concept of invisible creatures causing disease, that was beyond them. They believed in miasma, bad air, foul vapors rising from swamps, or rotting matter. They thought illness came from imbalances in the body's humors, or from the anger of the gods. So when they looked at that communal sponge, rinsed in running water, they saw hygiene. They saw practicality. They saw normal. Let your mind drift now, floating gently on the idea. Imagine you're walking out of that latrine into the morning light. The sun is climbing higher now, warming the stone streets. You nod to a friend, exchange a few words, and head toward the baths, because the day is still young, and there's so much more to the Roman routine. The baths are another social hub, another place where rich and poor mingle, where business deals are struck and friendships are forged. But we'll visit them later. For now, just feel the warmth of the sun on your face, the cobblestones beneath your feet, the hum of the city all around you. The communal sponge might seem like a small thing, a quirky footnote in history, but it tells us so much about how the Romans lived, how they thought, what they valued. They were communal, efficient, unashamed of the body's natural functions. They saw no reason to hide away, to be embarrassed. Life was life, and everyone shared in it. There's something oddly comforting about that, isn't there? In our world, we're often so isolated, so private. We lock ourselves away. We hide behind screens. We pretend we don't have bodies that do perfectly ordinary things. But the Romans, they sat side by side, chatted about their day, and shared a sponge. They were human together, and as the morning light grows brighter, as the city of Rome wakes fully, and the streets fill with vendors and shoppers, slaves and senators, children and dogs, you realize that this was just the beginning of the day. There were so many other things the Romans did, so many other habits and customs that would seem strange, even disgusting to us. But to them, just another Tuesday. So take a deep breath now. Let your muscles relax even further. We've only just begun our journey. The sponge on a stick is behind us now, rinsed and waiting for the next visitor. And ahead of us, there are 4 more fascinating, surprising, gently unsettling glimpses into Roman life. But there's no rush. We'll get there in our own time, at the pace of a slow, easy dream. Rest your eyes. Let the sounds of ancient Rome fade softly into the background, the trickle of water, the murmur of voices, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. And when you're ready, we'll move on to the next chapter of our story. But for now, just breathe, just be. The Romans are there, living their lives, and we're simply watching, gently, from a safe and comfortable distance, the tersorium, the communal sponge on a stick, waiting patiently in the flowing water. A small thing, a strange thing, but in its own way, a very Roman thing. And now, as the morning stretches on, we leave the latrine behind and step out into the wider world, where even more curious customs await us. But there's no hurry. We have all the time in the world, and the night is soft and welcoming around you. Sleep is close now. I can feel it. Let it come. Let the Romans fade into the gentle fog of dreams. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, we'll continue. Now, let's wander through the streets of Rome on a warm afternoon, maybe late spring, when the air is thick and lazy and the sun beats down on the tile roofs. You can hear the chatter of the marketplace voices, haggling, laughing, calling out the price of olives and bread, and threading through all of that noise, all of that color and movement, there's a smell. It's sharp, pungent, salty, with an edge that almost makes your eyes water. It's everywhere, this smell, clinging to the doorways of cookshops, drifting from the open windows of taverns, lingering on the clothes of the people who brush past you in the narrow streets. What is it? It's garum. Garum. Say it softly. Garum. Let the word settle on your tongue. It sounds exotic, doesn't it? A little mysterious. And in a way, it was one of the most defining flavors of Roman cuisine. If you were to sit down at a Roman table, whether you were a wealthy patrician reclining on a cushioned couch in a grand triclinium, or a laborer grabbing a quick meal at a street-side thermopolium, think of it as an ancient fast food counter. You would encounter garum. It was on everything. In everything. The Romans couldn't get enough of it. But what exactly was garum? Here's where you might want to pull that blanket a little tighter, because the answer is fermented fish guts. Yes, fermented fish guts. Specifically, the intestines, blood, and scraps of small fish, anchovies, sardines, mackerel left to rot, essentially, in the hot sun, packed in salt, for weeks or even months. The mixture would break down, liquefy, and become a dark, intensely flavored, incredibly pungent sauce. The Romans would then strain it, bottle it, and use it as we use salt, soy sauce, or ketchup today. A splash in a stew, a drizzle over vegetables, mixed into dressings, stirred into wine, everywhere. Always. Now, before you recoil too much, let me paint a picture that might soften the idea. Imagine you're in a Roman kitchen, and it's evening. The light is golden and low, slanting through the small window. There's a clay pot simmering over a charcoal brazier, and inside, a rich stew is bubbling chunks of lamb, onions, chickpeas, herbs. The cook, a slave named Lucia perhaps, leans over and adds a generous pour of garum from a small amphora. Immediately, the stew deepens in flavor. It becomes savory, complex, almost meaty in its umami richness. The garum doesn't taste like rotten fish knot at all. It tastes like depth, like the sea, like something ancient and satisfying. Does that sound familiar? It should, because garum is not so different from fish sauce in Southeast Asian cooking today, or Worcestershire sauce, which, by the way, contains fermented anchovies, or even the calatura di alici still made in parts of Italy. The Romans were onto something. They understood that fermentation unlocks flavors, that salt and thyme can transform something seemingly disgusting into something sublime. The production of garum was a major industry. Entire factories, called citeria, lined the coasts of the Roman Empire, especially in Spain, particularly around the region we now call Andalusia, and in North Africa. Archaeological excavations have uncovered massive stone vats where fish would be layered with salt and left to ferment under the sun. The process was smelly, no doubt about it. One Roman writer, Martial, joked that a single bottle of garum could make a whole neighborhood uninhabitable. but the end product was liquid gold. The finest garum, called garum sociorum or garum of the Allies, made from the first pressing of the fermented fish, was incredibly expensive, more valuable than wine, than honey, than perfume. It was a luxury item, a status symbol. Amphary of premium garum would be stamped with the maker's name, like a fine wine today. But even the cheap stuff, the lower grades made from the dregs of the fermentation, were used everywhere. The poor ate it. The rich ate it. Soldiers on the frontier carried it in their rations. It was the MSG of the ancient world, the secret ingredient that made everything taste better. Let's pause for a moment and think about taste, about how subjective it is. Close your eyes and imagine biting into something you love, maybe warm bread with butter, or a perfectly ripe peach, or chocolate melting on your tongue. That taste is wired into you, into your memories, your culture, your childhood. The Romans felt the same way about garum. A Roman child growing up would have tasted garum in almost every meal. It would have been comfort, home, normalcy. The smell that might make us wrinkle our noses would, to them, signal dinner, warmth, family. There's a recipe that survives from ancient Rome, written by a man named Apicius, who compiled a cookbook sometime in the 1st century AD. It's one of the only Roman cookbooks we have, and it's full of dishes that sound strange and wonderful. One recipe for a sauce to go with boiled ostrich. Yes, ostrich calls for pepper, mint, cumin, celery seed, dates, honey, vinegar, wine, and garum, always garum. Another, for a kind of custard dessert, includes eggs, milk, honey, and, you guessed it, garum. Sweet and savory combined, the way we might use salted caramel today. Imagine a Roman banquet now, in your mind's eye. It's a warm evening, and you've been invited to the home of a wealthy senator. You recline on a cushioned lectus, a couch arranged around a low table. Slaves move silently through the room, carrying trays of food-roasted peacock, stuffed dormice. We'll get to that later, don't worry. Fresh figs, oysters on ice, brought all the way from the coast, and over it all, in the sauces, in the marinades, that familiar, savory, deeply Roman flavor, garum. The room smells of wood smoke, roses, wine, and yes, faintly, that sharp temps of fermented fish. Lamps flicker, casting dancing shadows on the frescoed wall scenes of gods and heroes, gardens and myths. Someone is playing a lyre in the corner, a soft, wandering melody. Conversation flows, laughter rises and falls, and you take a bite of something, maybe a piece of bread dipped in a lentil stew, and it's delicious, rich, salty, satisfying. You have no idea that what you're tasting is essentially rotten fish. You just know it tastes like home. Garum wasn't just a Roman thing, by the way. The Greeks had a similar sauce called gyros, and the technique likely spread throughout the Mediterranean from even earlier cultures. The Phoenicians, those great seafaring traders, probably brought the idea with them as they sailed from port to port. But the Romans perfected it, industrialized it, and spread it to every corner of their empire. From Hadrian's Wall in the north of Britain to the deserts of Syria, from the Rhine to the Nile, people were eating garum. And here's something beautiful. We can still taste it today, in a way. Modern chefs and historians have recreated garum using ancient recipes. They've followed the process, layering fish with salt, leaving it in the sun, straining the liquid. And the result? It's intensely flavorful, salty, rich, almost like a very strong soy sauce. Some high-end restaurants even use recreated garum in their dishes now. A little nod to history, a bridge across 2,000 years. So maybe it's not so disgusting after all. Maybe it's just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things always seem strange at first, until they become part of your life, part of your palate, part of your normal. The Romans didn't see garum as gross. They saw it as essential. They saw it as delicious. And in a way, they were right. Let your mind drift now, floating on the idea of taste, of how flavors connect us to time and place. Imagine that Roman kitchen again, the stew bubbling, the garum being poured in. Imagine the satisfaction on Lucia's face as she stirs, knowing the meal will be good, that her master will be pleased, that the household will eat well tonight. It's a small moment, a quiet moment, but it's full of life. And beyond the kitchen, beyond the villa, the whole city of Rome is alive with garum. It's in the shops, the taverns, the street stalls. It's being shipped across the sea in great clay amphorae, sealed with cork and pitch. It's being traded, sold, savored. It's woven into the very fabric of Roman life. As essential as bread or wine, you might even say that garum was the ketchup of the ancient world, but more expensive, more complex, more deeply embedded in the culture. And just like we can't imagine a burger without ketchup, the Romans couldn't imagine a meal without garum. It was normal. It was necessary. It was home. So, as the evening deepens, as the banquet winds down and the guests begin to leave, as the slaves clear away the plates and douse the lamps, the smell of garum lingers. It clings to the air, to the walls, to the memory. And somewhere in a factory on the Spanish coast, another batch is fermenting in the sun, turning slowly from fish guts into liquid gold. Take a slow breath now. Let the scent fade from your mind, replaced by whatever gentle smell surrounds you in your own space. Maybe clean sheets, maybe lavender, maybe just the neutral calm of night air. The Romans are still there in the past, pouring their garum, savoring their meals, and we're here, learning from them, marveling at them, finding strange comfort in the fact that what's disgusting to one culture is delicious to another. And as we leave the banquet behind, as the night settles over Rome like a soft blanket, we prepare to move on. There are still more strange customs to explore, more surprising habits to uncover. But for now, let the thought of garum rest. Let it become just another thread in the rich tapestry of Roman life, woven in among the marble and the mosaics, the aqueducts and the amphitheaters. Sleep is drawing closer. I can hear it in the quiet, in the spaces between words. Let it come. The Romans are fading into history, but their flavors, their lives, their strange and wonderful normalcy remains. And we'll return to them soon. Whenever you're ready, rest now, breathe, and let the taste of ancient Rome dissolve gently on your tongue, like salt in warm water, like time slipping softly away. The sun is climbing higher now over Rome, and the streets are bustling. Let's follow the sound of splashing water and rhythmic thumping, and find ourselves outside a Follonica Roman laundry and dry cleaning establishment. The smell hits you first, even before you round the corner. It's sharp, acrid, unmistakable, ammonia. And where does that ammonia come from? Well, my friend, from large clay jars placed strategically around the city, into which passers-by mostly would urinate. Yes, public urination, collected, fermented, and then used to clean clothes. Let that settle gently into your mind. The Romans, those sophisticated builders of aqueducts and roads, those lovers of poetry and philosophy, collected pee. They collected it in big jars called dolia, and then they bought it, sold it, and used it as the primary cleaning agent in their laundries. Urine everywhere. Now, before your nose wrinkles too much, let's understand why. Because, as strange as it sounds, the Romans weren't being absurd, they were being clever. Urine, you see, contains urea, which breaks down into ammonia. And ammonia is a powerful cleaning agent. It cuts through grease, it lifts stains, it kills bacteria. Even today, many modern cleaning products contain ammonia. The Romans simply went straight to the source. Imagine stepping inside a Phalonica now, in your mind. It's a large, open workshop, with vats sunk into the floor, and beams of sunlight slanting through high windows. The air is warm and damp, and yes, that sharp ammonia smell is strong. But there's also the scent of wet wool, of clay, of the olive oil-based soap they sometimes use. Workers' fullers, they're called, are standing waist-deep in the vats, trampling on piles of cloth, stomping and kneading, almost like they're making wine, except they're standing in a mixture of water, fuller's earth, a kind of clay, and fermented urine. The cloth beneath their feet is turning white, or at least whiter. Stains are lifting. The wool is softening. It's working. And the foolers, they're chatting, joking, maybe singing a work song to keep the rhythm. This is their job. This is normal. They don't think twice about the urine. It's just another tool, another ingredient, like the clay or the water. Now, the urine didn't come from just anywhere. It was collected from those public urinals stationed around the city, on street corners, near taverns, in busy marketplaces. These jars were emptied regularly, and the contents were sold to the fool. It was a commodity. In fact, the Emperor Vespasian, who ruled from 69 to 79 AD, even placed a tax on the urine collected from public urinals. His son, Titus, complained about the tax, calling it undignified. But Vespasian, ever the pragmatist, reportedly held up a gold coin and said, "Pecunia non alet," money doesn't smell. That phrase has survived through the centuries. Even today, in some languages, public urinals are called Vespasians in his honor. History has a sense of humor, doesn't it? Let your mind wander gently now, imagining the logistics of this whole system. There are men whose job it is to collect the urine, cart it through the streets in sloshing amphorae, and deliver it to the Phalonica. There are regulations, prices, negotiations. I'll take 20 liters of your finest urine, please. It's business. It's practical. It's Rome. And the laundry itself. Why was it so important? Because Romans, especially wealthy Romans, wore a lot of white. The toga, that iconic garment, was traditionally white wool, and keeping it clean was a mark of status. A senator couldn't appear in the forum with a stained, dingy toga. It would be like showing up to a business meeting today in a wrinkled, coffee-stained suit. So the Phalonicae were essential. They cleaned, they bleached, they pressed. They used urine, yes, but also sulfur fumes to whiten the cloth. And they'd stretch the fabric on wicker frames to dry and shape it. Picture now a wealthy Roman, a man named Gaius, perhaps, handing his toga to a slave, who carries it to the Folonica. The fuller takes it, inspects it, notes the wine stains from last night's banquet, the mud from the walk home. He nods, promises it will be ready in a few days. Then he tosses it into the vat, where the urine mixture is already waiting. He hires a worker, maybe a young man, poor, needing the income to climb into the vat and start trampling. The urine, now aged and even more pungent, begins to break down the stains. The fuller's earth absorbs the oils. Slowly, steadily, the toga becomes clean again. Days later, Gaius receives his toga back, white as snow, smelling faintly of sulfur, and maybe a little bit of the rosemary or lavender the fullers sometimes use to mask the ammonia. He's pleased. He has no idea what went into cleaning it, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. It's clean. That's what matters. But there's more. Urine wasn't just for laundry. Oh no. The Romans found all sorts of uses for it. Some people used it as a mouthwash. Yes, mouthwash. They believed the ammonia whitened teeth. The poet Catullus, in the 1st century BC, even mocked a man named Ignatius for his bright white smile, insinuating that he must have been brushing his teeth with urine. The whiter your teeth, the more urine you've drunk, he wrote, more or less. It was an insult, but also a reflection of an actual practice. Some people did use urine, or products made from it, for dental hygiene, and tanners used urine too, in the process of curing leather. The ammonia helped break down the proteins in animal hides, making them soft and workable. So in a way, urine touched many aspects of Roman daily life: clothing, teeth, leather goods. It was everywhere, repurposed, recycled, valued. Now, let's pause and think about this from a different angle. The Romans didn't have modern chemistry. They didn't understand molecules or chemical reactions in the way we do, but they were incredible observers. They noticed that urine, after sitting for a while, became more effective at cleaning. They noticed that it worked better than just water. So they used it. They experimented, refined the process, and built an industry around it. They were practical, resourceful, and unashamed. And there's something almost beautiful about that. In our modern world, we throw so much away. We flush, we discard, we waste. But the Romans, they found value in everything. Even urine became a resource, a commodity, a solution to a problem. It's a kind of sustainability, in a way, even if it makes us squirm a little. Imagine the Folonica at the end of the day now. The workers are climbing out of the vats, rinsing their feet, hanging the clean cloth to dry on wooden frames in the courtyard. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The smell of ammonia is still strong, but it's mixed now with the evening air, the scent of cooking from nearby homes, the distant sound of a flute playing somewhere. The fuller tallies his accounts, counts his coins, plans for tomorrow's deliveries. Outside, the city is winding down. Shops are closing, vendors are packing up their wares, and those public urinals, they're still there, still being used, still slowly filling with the next day's supply. It's a cycle, continuous, efficient, very Roman. You might be wondering, did the Romans themselves think this was disgusting? There's evidence that some did, or at least found the smell unpleasant. But disgust is often about class and context. The wealthy Romans, the ones who never set foot in a Folonica, might have wrinkled their noses at the idea. But they also wanted clean togas, so they didn't complain too loudly. And the foolers themselves, this was their livelihood. They took pride in their work, in the whiteness of the cloth they produced. They were skilled craftsmen, members of guilds, respected in their own way. And let's not forget, every culture has things that seem bizarre to outsiders. 1,000 years from now, people might look back at us and find our habits strange. They used chemicals made from petroleum to clean their clothes. They sprayed their bodies with artificial fragrances. They drank the milk of other animals. It's all relative. What's disgusting is just what's unfamiliar, what's outside our own experience. So let's be gentle with the Romans. They lived in a different world, with different resources, different knowledge. They did the best they could, and in many ways, they did it brilliantly. They built cities that lasted centuries. They wrote poetry that still moves us. They created art that still inspires. And yes, they used urine to clean their clothes, because it worked. Take a slow breath now. Feel your body sinking deeper into your bed, your muscles loose and heavy. The Romans are still there, in the past, stomping in their vats, emptying their urinals, going about their lives. And we're here, learning, understanding, maybe even appreciating the strange ingenuity of it all. The Polonica is closing for the night. The workers are heading home, tired, their feet sore but satisfied. The clean togas are folded and ready for pickup. And somewhere in the city, Gaius is already planning his outfit for tomorrow's forum appearance, blissfully unaware of the urine that made his toga so brilliantly white. Let that image fade now, like the last light of sunset slipping below the horizon. The smell of ammonia dissipates, replaced by the cool, clean scent of night. And we move on, gently, to the next chapter of our Roman journey. But there's no rush. Sleep is close, so close. Let it come in its own time. The Romans, with all their strange habits, are fading into dreams. And you, my friend, are drifting with them, soft and calm, into the peaceful dark. Let's step now into the opulence of a Roman banquet. But this time, let's focus on something small, something unexpected. Imagine you're reclining on that cushioned lectus again, the warm glow of oil lamps casting flickering light across the room. Slaves are bringing out course after course, roasted birds, platters of fruit, honeyed cakes, and then, on a small silver dish, something catches your eye. They're tiny, round, golden brown, glistening with honey. They look almost like little roasted animals, and that's because they are. Dormice, roasted dormice, stuffed with pork and pine nuts, glazed with honey, and served whole, soft and strange. Dormice, those little creatures that look like a cross between a mouse and a squirrel, with fluffy tails and big, dark eyes. In the wild, they hibernate for months, curling up in trees, living off their fat reserves. And the Romans, they ate them. They considered them a delicacy. Now, I can feel you shifting a little. Maybe your nose is wrinkling. Maybe you're thinking, no, thank you. But let's explore this gently, because, as with everything Roman, there's more to the story. Dormice weren't just grabbed from the forest and tossed onto a plate. No, they were farmed, carefully raised in special clay jars called glararia. These jars were large, with air holes and smooth inner walls that prevented the dormice from climbing out. Inside, the dormice would be fed a rich diet of acorns, chestnuts, and walnuts, fattening them up. They'd live in the dark, which mimicked their natural hibernation conditions, and they'd grow plump and tender. It was a whole industry, a niche market for the very wealthy. Picture a Roman villa in the countryside now. In your mind's eye, it's autumn, and the air is crisp and golden. In a side room, away from the main house, there are rows of these clay jars. A slave lifts the lid on one, peers inside. The dormice are rustling, munching, thriving. They're almost ready. In a few weeks, they'll be harvested, prepared, and sent to the city to be served at the grandest banquets. Why dormice, you might ask? Why not just stick to the usual meats: pork, lamb, chicken? Well, partly because the Romans were adventurous eaters. They loved novelty, variety, the exotic. A good banquet wasn't just about filling your stomach. It was about impressing your guests, showing off your wealth and sophistication. Serving dormice was a statement. It said, I have access to rare and expensive foods. I am cultured. I am refined. And the taste, according to the Romans, dormice was delicious, sweet, rich, almost nutty in flavor because of their diet. The meat was tender, and when roasted with honey and spices, it became a perfect bite-sized treat. Imagine popping one into your mouth at a banquet, the honey coating your lips, the soft meat giving way under your teeth, the crunch of pine nuts inside. Strange, yes, but also kind of decadent. There's a recipe in that cookbook by Apicius I mentioned earlier. It goes something like this. Stuff the dormice with minced pork and the meat of the whole dormice, pounded with pepper, pine nuts, and garum. Sew them up, place them on a tile, and roast in the oven or cook in a pot. Simple, direct, very Roman. The recipe assumes you have dormice on hand, as if they're as common as chicken. For the wealthy, they were. Let's think about the banquet itself for a moment. You're there, reclining, and the dormice are brought out. Maybe you've had a bit too much wine, watered down, as was the custom. The room is warm, the conversation is lively, and someone is reciting poetry. You reach for a dormouse without thinking, because everyone else is, and it's part of the experience. You bite down, it's sweet, savory, and rich. You have another. The night goes on, a blur of flavors and laughter and music. But here's the thing, eating dormice wasn't just about taste or status. It was also tied to Roman ideas about nature, about the wild and the domesticated. The Romans loved to control their environment, to bend nature to their will. They built aqueducts across mountains. They shaped marble into gods. They turned wild dormice into farm-raised delicacies. It was a way of asserting dominance, of showing that even the smallest, wildest creatures could be cultivated, perfected, consumed. And dormice weren't the only unusual thing on the Roman menu, by the way. They ate flamingo tongues, considered a rare treat. They ate sea urchins, snails fattened on milk and wine, and peacocks. They even ate something called garum discumber, a fermented fish sauce made specifically from mackerel, which we touched on earlier. The Roman palate was adventurous, to say the least. But let's come back to the dormice, because there's something oddly endearing about them. They're so small, so harmless. In modern times, dormice are protected in many places. The edible dormouse, or glees, is the species the Romans ate, and it still exists today. In Britain, there's even a population that was introduced ironically by Victorian-era Brits who were fascinated by Roman customs. These dormice now live in the forests of southeast England, descendants of someone's historical experiment. Imagine a Roman farmer now, checking his gloraria, making sure his dormice are healthy and fat. He's planning for the next big banquet season winter, when the wealthy host elaborate feasts. He's calculating profits, negotiating with buyers. For him, this is business, as normal as raising chickens or growing grain. He doesn't think it's strange. He's just supplying a demand, and the people eating the dormice. They're not thinking about cruelty or ethics in the way we might. They're thinking about flavor, about the prestige of serving something rare, about the pleasure of the meal. It's a different mindset, a different time. We can judge it, or we can simply observe it, understand it, and let it be. Let your mind drift now, imagining the banquet hall again. The platters of dormice are empty now, licked clean. The guests are moving on to the next course, maybe a whole roasted boar, an apple in its mouth, garnished with dates. The night is deepening, the lamps burning lower. Outside, the city of Rome is quiet, sleeping under a canopy of stars. And in the countryside, in those clay jars, the dormice are still rustling, eating, growing, unaware of the fate that awaits them. There's a certain sadness to it, maybe, but also a reminder that every culture has its own relationship with food, with animals, with the natural world. We eat things that would horrify other cultures. We raise animals in ways that would seem strange or cruel to people from the past or the future. It's all context. It's all perspective. And perhaps, in a strange way, the Romans were less removed from their food than we are. They knew where it came from. They saw the animals, prepared them, ate them whole. There was no plastic packaging, no factory farms hidden from view. It was direct, immediate, real. The dormouse on the plate had been a dormouse in a jar just days before. There was an honesty to it, even if it made us uncomfortable. Take a deep breath now. Feel the softness of your pillow, the weight of your blanket. The Romans are still there, in the past, feasting on their dormice, living their lavish, complicated lives. And you're here, safe and warm, drifting on the edge of sleep. The banquet is ending. The guests are beginning to leave, stumbling slightly, full and content. The slaves are clearing the plates, snuffing the lamps, and the dormice. They're a memory now, a strange and fleeting taste, a story to tell tomorrow in the forum. Did you try the dormice at Lucius's banquet? Incredible. Let that scene fade, soft as a candle flame guttering out. The marble halls, the silver platters, the honeyed dormisal of it dissolving into the gentle fog of history. And we move on, quietly, to the next part of our journey through Roman strangeness. But there's no urgency. We have all the time in the world, and sleep is wrapping around you like a warm cloak. The Romans, with their adventurous palates and their farmed dormice, are fading into the night. And you, my friend, are sinking deeper, deeper into rest. Let them go. Let it all go. The next chapter will be there when you're ready. But for now, just breathe, just be. The dormice are safe now, in your mind, scurrying back into the forest, into the realm of dreams. And you're following them gently into the soft, quiet dark. Now, let's return to that grand Roman banquet one more time, because there's something else happening there, something that might surprise you even more than the dormice. The feast has been going on for hours. Course after course has been brought out: oysters, roasted meats, exotic fruits, cakes dripping with honey. And you, the guest, are beginning to feel uncomfortably full. Your stomach is stretched, aching. You've eaten more in one evening than you normally would in 3 days. But the meal isn't over. There are still more courses to come. So what do? Well, if you're a Roman, especially a wealthy Roman at a particularly lavish feast, you might excuse yourself. Step into a side room called a vomitorium and empty your stomach. Yes, vomit, purge yourself, and then, feeling lighter, you'd return to the banquet and continue eating. Let that sink in softly, like a stone dropping into still water. The Romans, at least some of them, would deliberately vomit during meals so they could keep eating. It sounds shocking, doesn't it? Excessive, gluttonous, even grotesque. But let's explore it with care, because, as always, there's more nuance here than the surface suggests. First, a small clarification. The word vomitorium has become popularly associated with this practice, but in reality, a vomitorium in Roman architecture was a passageway in an amphitheater or stadium, the corridors through which crowds would spew out after an event. The name came from the Latin vomer, meaning to spew forth, but it referred to people, not stomach contents. However, the idea that Romans had designated spaces or practices for vomiting during feasts is based on historical accounts. Writers like Seneca and Suetonius mention it, sometimes with disapproval, sometimes simply as fact. So, did it happen? It seems that yes, it did, at least among certain circles of the Roman elite, particularly during the later imperial period when excess and indulgence reached remarkable heights. Not every Roman did this. Not every banquet featured it. But it was known. It was possible. And for those who engaged in it, it was a way to extend pleasure, to keep the feast going, to not miss out on a single exotic dish. Imagine the scene. The banquet hall is warm, almost too warm from the braziers and the press of bodies. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat, perfume, wine, and wood smoke. You've been reclining for hours, your belly distended. Across the room, another guest stands, a bit unsteady, and makes his way to a side chamber. No one bats an eye. It's understood. He returns a few minutes later, wiping his mouth, and reclines again, ready for the next course. Slaves bring out platters of something new perhaps, a whole swan, roasted and gilded, its feathers reattached for effect. The guest reaches for a piece, and the feast continues. Now, there are a few ways to think about this. One is moral condemnation. How wasteful, how disgusting, what decadence. And certainly, Roman moralists thought so too. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, railed against such excess, writing, "They vomit, so they may eat, and eat, so they may vomit." He saw it as emblematic of a culture losing its way, drowning in luxury, and losing sight of virtue. And he wasn't alone. Many Romans looked at these practices with distaste, seeing them as symptoms of moral decay. But let's also think about it from another angle: pleasure, indulgence, the celebration of abundance. For the Romans who engaged in this, the banquet wasn't just about sustenance. It was theater, art, an experience to be savored in all its facets. To stop eating because you were full would be to cut the experience short, to miss the chef's next creation, the surprise course, the conversation that might happen over dessert. So they found a way to continue. It was extreme, yes, but it was also, in a strange way, logical within their value system. And let's remember, these were the wealthiest Romans, the ones with access to the empire's riches. They lived in a world where, for them, food was abundant, where they could have anything they wanted. Most Romans didn't live like this. The average Roman ate simple meals: bread, olives, a bit of cheese, maybe some vegetables, or a small piece of fish. The lavish banquets were for the elite, the senators, the emperors, the ultra-rich. It was a display of power and wealth, and like all displays, it could tip into absurdity. Let your mind wander now to the perspective of a slave at one of these banquets. Let's call him Felix. He's standing in the corner, waiting to refill wine cups, to carry away empty plates. He's been on his feet for hours, and he's tired. He's also hungry. He watches the guests eat and eat, watches them leave to vomit, watches them return and eat more. To him, it must seem incomprehensible. He might get a few scraps later, whatever the guests don't finish, and he'll be grateful for them. The contrast is stark, painful even, but Felix doesn't complain. He can't. This is the world he lives in, the structure of Roman society. Slavery was a fundamental part of the economy, the household, the culture. It's a deeply uncomfortable fact for us to confront, and it should be. But to understand the Romans, we have to see the whole picture. The luxury and the suffering intertwined. Back to the banquet. Another course arrives this time, a dish of brains, perhaps, mixed with rose petals and honey. Or maybe sea urchins, fresh from the coast, served on ice. The guests exclaim, delighted by the novelty. They take small bites, savoring and discussing. Someone makes a witty remark, and laughter ripples through the room. The feast is as much about social performance as it is about food, and vomiting, in this context, becomes just another tool, another way to extend the performance. It's not seen as shameful, at least not in these circles, at least not in this moment. It's practical, it's indulgent, it's Roman. Now, there are also accounts of emetics being used, substances that induce vomiting. Recipes survive that describe mixing certain herbs or oils to help the process along. This wasn't just a finger down the throat. It was, in some cases, a deliberate, almost medicinal act. The Romans believed in the concept of cura, of caring for the body, and they had various methods for purging what they saw as excess or imbalance. Vomiting could be part of that. But let's also acknowledge, this is one of the aspects of Roman culture that's hardest for us to find relatable or understandable. It feels wasteful in a world where hunger still exists. It feels excessive in a time when we're more aware of consumption's costs, and that's okay. We don't have to approve. We can simply observe, understand it as a product of its time and place, and move on. Imagine the banquet winding down now. It's late, maybe past midnight. Many of the guests are very drunk, despite the wine being watered. Some have fallen asleep on their couches. Others are still talking, their words slurred, their laughter loud. The slaves are exhausted. The food platters are mostly empty, though there are still piles of uneaten delicacies. No one could possibly eat it all. Even with vomiting, in the morning, the leftovers will be distributed to the household slaves, or sold in the market, or thrown away. The guests will wake with headaches, with stomachaches, with vague memories of excess, and life will go on. Another banquet will be planned. Another display of wealth and indulgence will be staged. But most Romans didn't live like this. Most Romans lived modest lives, worked hard, ate simply. They might hear stories of these lavish feasts, might gossip about them in the forum, but they'd never attend one. The excess was confined to a small, elite slice of society, and even within that slice, not everyone participated. Plenty of wealthy Romans, influenced by Stoic or Epicurean philosophy, lived more moderately, valuing simplicity and self-control. So the image of the Romans all vomiting at banquets is a bit of a caricature. It happened, yes. It was real, but it wasn't universal. It was a feature of a particular time, a particular class, a particular strain of cultural excess that some Romans themselves found distasteful. Take a slow breath now. Feel the weight of all this settling and then lifting, like a burden you don't have to carry. The Romans are there, in the past, with all their contradictions, all their extremes, and you're here, learning, understanding, feeling grateful, perhaps, for your own simpler, quieter meal times. The banquet hall is emptying. The lamps have burned low. Felix and the other slaves are finally clearing the last of the dishes, collecting the cups, sweeping the floor. Outside, the sky is beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. The city will wake soon, and the cycle will begin again. Work, trade, life in all its ordinary beauty. Let the image of the banquet fade now, dissolving like morning mist. The excess, the indulgence, the strangeness, all of it slipping away. And we prepare to move to the final chapter of our journey, the last strange Roman custom we'll explore tonight. But there's no rush, no urgency. Sleep is so close now, cradling you, pulling you gently down into its softness. The Romans, with all their feasting and purging, are retreating into history. And you, my dear friend, are retreating into dreams. Let them go. Let yourself drift. The night is gentle, and the past is far away. One more chapter awaits, but only when you're ready. For now, just rest. We've arrived at the final chapter of our journey through strange Roman customs, and this one might be the most visceral, the most unsettling, and yet, in its own way, the most revealing. Let's step into the Colosseum now, in your mind. It's a hot afternoon, and the stands are packed, 50,000 people, roaring, chanting, waving. The air smells of sweat, dust, blood, and excitement. Down in the arena, two gladiators are fighting, their muscles glistening, their weapons flashing in the sun. The crowd is on its feet, screaming for blood, for victory, for spectacle. And then it's over. One gladiator falls. The victor stands, chest heaving, blood his own or his opponent's streaking his skin. He raises his weapon, and the crowd erupts. Slaves rush out to drag away the fallen, to rake the sand smooth again. But before they do, something else happens. People vendors, slaves, sometimes even wealthy patrons, forward with small vials and clothes. They're collecting the blood that's soaked into the sand. They're scraping the sweat from the victor's body with curved metal tools called They're bottling it, preserving it, and selling it, because, you see, the Romans believed that gladiators' sweat and blood had powerful medicinal and even magical properties. Let that settle in your mind. Soft, the sweat and blood of a man who has just risked his life, who has fought and possibly killed, was seen as valuable, potent, imbued with strength and vitality. And people would buy it, drink it, apply it to their skin, use it to cure ailments or enhance their own vigor. Why? Let's explore this gently because it's rooted in Roman beliefs about life force, about courage, about the body. The gladiators were, in many ways, the ultimate expression of Roman virtues, strength, bravery, endurance. They faced death regularly, and they did so in front of thousands. To the Romans, that kind of courage, that kind of vitality, was almost superhuman, and they believed that it could be transferred, absorbed, taken into oneself. Picture a Roman woman, now middle-aged, worried about her fading beauty. She's heard that gladiator sweat, rubbed into the skin, can restore youthfulness, make the skin firm and glowing. So she sends a slave to the Colosseum with a few coins, and he returns with a small vial of thick, yellowish liquid, still warm. She mixes it with olive oil and applies it to her face, her neck, and her arms. She believes. And maybe, in her belief, she feels a bit more vital, a bit more alive. Or imagine a man, older, struggling with what the Romans called impotence or weakness. He's told that drinking a potion made with gladiator blood will restore his vigor, his masculinity. So he visits an apothecary who mixes blood with wine and herbs, and he drinks it down, grimacing at the taste but hopeful. This was a real practice, documented in Roman texts. The naturalist Pliny, the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, mentioned that epileptics would rush into the arena to drink the blood of fallen gladiators, believing it would cure their seizures. The warm blood of a man who had just died violently was thought to carry special power. Let your mind drift now, imagining the arena after the games. The crowds have left, and the sun is setting, casting long shadows across the empty seats. The sand in the arena is dark with blood, trampled and stained. A few scavengers remain, collecting what they can. A man scoops blood-soaked sand into a jar. A woman wrings out a cloth, stained red, into a bottle. It's grim, yes, but to them, it's also valuable. It's a commodity, a cure, a connection to something powerful. And the gladiators themselves, what did they think of all this? We don't have many first-hand accounts, because gladiators, many of them slaves or prisoners of war, didn't often write down their thoughts. But we can imagine they were objectified, commodified, seen as both heroes and animals. Their sweat, their blood, their very bodies were not entirely their own. Even in death, they were harvested, used, sold. Some gladiators, the famous ones, were treated like celebrities. They had fans, admirers, people who wanted to touch them, to own a piece of them. A vial of sweat from a famous gladiator could be worth a small fortune. It was like owning a piece of a rock star today, a lock of hair or a signed photo, except much more visceral, much more intimate, and beyond the sweat and blood. There were other beliefs, too. Some thought that eating the liver of a gladiator could impart courage. Others believed that gladiator fat could be used in ointments for various ailments. The body of the gladiator, alive or dead, was seen as a source of power, and that power was extracted, bottled, sold. Now, let's pause and think about what this tells us about Roman culture. On one level, it's about their understanding of medicine, which was a mix of observation, philosophy, superstition, and trial and error. They didn't have germ theory or modern anatomy. They relied on the writings of Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, and on their own experimentation. If drinking blood seemed to help someone, even if only as a placebo, then it became part of the medical toolkit. But, on another level, It's about their relationship with violence and death. The Romans were, in many ways, desensitized to violence. Gladiatorial games, public executions, animal hunts, these were entertainment. Death was a spectacle. And yet, they also revered life force, vitality, courage. The gladiator embodied that contradictional life and death intertwine, violence as both horror and source of power. Let your mind wander now to the streets of Rome, away from the Colosseum. It's evening, and the city is alive with activity. In a small shop, an apothecary is selling his wares, oils, poultices, and yes, vials of gladiator sweat. A customer haggles over the price, skeptical but intrigued. The apothecary assures him it's genuine, fresh from this afternoon's games. The customer buys it, tucks it into his tunic, and walks away, hoping for a miracle. And maybe it works, in a way. Not because the sweat itself has magic properties, but because belief is powerful. The placebo effect is real. If you believe something will heal you, will strengthen you, sometimes your body responds. The Romans understood this on some level, even if they didn't have the language for it. They understood that the mind and body are connected, that faith and expectation matter. But there's also a darker side to all this, one we can't ignore. The commodification of the gladiator's body, the reduction of a human being to a source of raw materials, is deeply troubling. It reflects the brutality of Roman slavery, the dehumanization that was baked into their society. Gladiators were people, with hopes and fears and families, but they were treated as objects, as things to be used. And yet, some gladiators did achieve fame, wealth, even freedom. A successful gladiator could win his freedom, could retire, could become a trainer or a wealthy man. It was rare, but possible. So even within the brutality, there was a glimmer of humanity, of possibility. The Romans were contradictions, cruel and compassionate, sophisticated and savage, all at once. Imagine now a gladiator who has survived many fights, who has earned his freedom. He's older now, scarred, but alive. He walks through the streets of Rome and sees a shop selling vials of gladiator sweat. He smiles, a bitter smile, and keeps walking. He knows the truth. It's just sweat, just blood. But he also knows that people need to believe in something, need to feel like they can control their fate, their health, their lives. So he lets them believe. The sun is setting over Rome now, the sky a deep orange, fading to purple. The Colosseum stands empty, its arches casting long shadows. The games are over for the day. The vendors have packed up their vials and gone home. The sand in the arena has been raked smooth, ready for tomorrow. And somewhere in the city, someone is rubbing gladiator sweat into their skin. Someone else is drinking blood mixed with wine. Both of them hoping, believing, trying to hold on to life a little longer. Take a deep breath now and let it all go. The violence, the strangeness, the desperation, the hope-let. The Romans are fading, retreating into history, into the realm of stories and lessons. And you, my friend, have traveled with them, have seen their world, have understood them just a little bit better. We've journeyed through 5 disgusting things. The Romans considered normal the communal sponge on a stick, the fish sauce on everything, the urine used as detergent, the dormice served at banquets, the vomiting between courses, and now the gladiator, sweat and blood as medicine, each one strange, each one unsettling. but each one revealing something true about the Romans, about humanity, about the way culture shapes what we find acceptable or abhorrent. And here's the beautiful thing, none of it matters now. The Romans are long gone. Their customs have faded, but their cities, their art, their literature, their engineering, those remain. We can learn from them, marvel at them, and let the strange parts simply be part of the story, not a judgment, just a fact. So as we close this chapter, as the final images of ancient Rome slip away, let yourself feel the distance, the safety of time. You're here, in your bed, in your own time, and all of this is just a story, a dream, a gentle wandering through the past. The gladiators rest now, their battles over. The banquets have ended, the latrines are empty, the streets are quiet. May these memories, these strange and fascinating glimpses into Roman life, guide you into peaceful dreams tonight. May you drift off with a sense of wonder, of gratitude for the strangeness of history, for the reminder that what's normal is always changing, always relative, always surprising. If you drifted off somewhere along the way, that's perfect. That's exactly what this was for. And if you made it all the way to the end, I hope you feel a bit more connected to the past, a bit more curious, a bit more at peace. Let me know in the comments below how far you got, what surprised you, what made you smile or wrinkle your nose. I love hearing from you, and if this journey helped you unwind, if my voice was a companion in the quiet of your night, consider tapping that like button and subscribing for more of these peaceful historical wanderings, but only if it feels right. I'm here either way, whenever you need a calm voice and a strange story to drift off to. Sweet dreams, my friends. May the Romans rest easy in history, and may you rest easy in your bed. The night is soft, the world is quiet, and sleep is waiting, gentle and kind, to carry you away. Good night.